Hey guys, tonight we're going to pull back the velvet curtains and peek into the utterly bizarre, yet strangely cozy, world of 17th century French royal bedtime routines. Imagine, if you will, the vast, echoing halls of Versailles, the chill of stone seeping into every corner, even in summer. You're a monarch, perhaps the Sun King himself, Louis XIV, wrapped in layers of silk and brocade. But as night descends, a shiver runs down your spine. The thought of slipping into a bed that feels like a marble slab, even one draped in the finest damask, is, frankly, unbearable. You probably wouldn't last a single night in these chilly chateaus without some modern creature comforts, or perhaps a dedicated warm body. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always fun to imagine you all drifting off across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in the grand chambers of a French palace, the air thick with the scent of beeswax and ancient dust. The tapestries on the walls, depicting grand hunting scenes or mythological escapades, do little to ward off the penetrating cold that seems to cling to everything. As the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of deep violet and fading orange, the chill intensifies. You, as the discerning monarch, are preparing for bed, not just any bed, mind you, but one that could comfortably house a small family, draped in layers of the most exquisite fabrics, woven in lion and beyond. Yet, despite the opulence, the sheer size of these royal sleeping quarters, coupled with the rudimentary heating systems of the era, think vast, inefficient fireplaces that swallowed logs whole and belched smoke, meant that your bed, even with its feather mattress, often felt like an ice block. It's enough to give even the most stoic ruler a case of the shivers. The sheer inconvenience of it all, the minor but persistent discomfort, could easily chip away at the regal composure. This wasn't just a minor inconvenience, you see. It was a genuine problem for the health and comfort of the nobility. Imagine trying to get a restful night's sleep when every muscle is tensed against the cold, your teeth chattering ever so slightly. A good night's sleep was considered vital, not just for personal well-being, but for the effective running of the kingdom. A cranky king, after all, might make rash decisions about taxes or wars, and no one wanted that. This concern for a warm bed, while seemingly trivial to us with our electric blankets and central heating, was a significant enough issue to warrant a dedicated solution. And so, a rather fascinating, and dare I say, mildly amusing solution emerged: the royal bed warmer. This wasn't some quick fix or a passing fad. It was a specialized role, often held by someone with a surprisingly intimate knowledge of the royal chambers, and indeed, the royal personage's sleeping habits. They had a singular, crucial task: to ensure the royal bed was perfectly toasty, an inviting haven in the otherwise frigid aristocratic existence. It's a job that sounds almost too mundane to be true, yet it speaks volumes about the priorities and daily realities of life in 17th century French high society. You might chuckle at the thought of it now, a grown adult whose sole purpose is to warm another's bed, but back then, it was a practical necessity. The warmth provided by a professional bed warmer was not merely a luxury. It was a foundational element of comfort and health for those who ruled. After all, a cold bed can truly ruin your day, even if your day mostly consists of being fawned over. Historians still debate the exact lineage of this particular court position, whether it evolved from earlier personal attendants or was a more formal creation of the elaborate Bourbon court. But one thing is clear: someone had to do it. So you're nestled in your lavish bed, still feeling that lingering chill, wondering how on earth anyone managed a good night's rest in these monumental, drafty palaces. This is where our unsung hero, the royal bed warmer, enters the scene. Now, the concept of warming a bed isn't new, not by a long shot. People have been trying to make their sleeping surfaces less akin to a polar ice cap for millennia. You can imagine early humans bundling up with warm stones, or perhaps even a particularly agreeable furry animal, to chase away the night's bite. But the 17th century French court, with its penchant for turning every aspect of life into an elaborate ritual, took this simple act and elevated it to a formal designated position. Picture this. It's the early evening, the last slivers of daylight fading from the high windows. You, the king or queen, are likely still engaged in courtly duties, perhaps a seemingly endless game of cards or a lengthy discussion about the latest military campaign. But even as you strategize, a discreet figure, often a trusted chamberlain or a lady-in-waiting, is preparing your personal sanctuary. This isn't just someone casually tossing a hot water bottle under the covers. No, this is a meticulous, almost scientific process. The bed warmer would approach your vast, intimidating bed, often a four-poster affair, draped in heavy velvet, and begin their work. They might use a long-handled warming pan, a brass or copper vessel filled with hot coals, carefully glided between the sheets to dissipate the chill. Or perhaps they'd employ the rather more natural method, one that might make you squirm slightly if you considered it too closely in our modern, hygiene-obsessed world. Yes, for a time, a common and surprisingly effective method involved the bed warmer, or sometimes even a designated servant, actually lying in the bed themselves for a period before the royal occupant arrived. Imagine that for a job description. Must be comfortable pre-warming royal mattresses with own body heat. Discretion absolutely essential. It sounds like something out of a particularly droll historical comedy, doesn't it? But it was a practical solution to a very cold problem. This practice, while perhaps less common in the most formal royal circles by the height of Louis XIV's reign, certainly had its roots in earlier, less ceremonial times and persisted in some noble households. It highlights a fascinating clash of extremes. Immense wealth and pomp on one hand, and surprisingly basic, almost primitive, solutions to daily comforts on the other. You might think, why didn't they just invent central heating? Well, dear listener, sometimes the simplest solution is the human one, even if it does involve a temporary human hot water bottle. Historians still argue about the precise frequency and status of such human warming roles in the grandest palaces versus lesser noble homes. But anecdotal evidence suggests it was far from uncommon across Europe. It just goes to show you, even royalty couldn't escape the basic laws of thermodynamics. The bed warmer's role, particularly when using actual implements, required a delicate touch. Too hot, and you risk scorching the fine linens or, worse, the royal posterior. Too cold, and you failed in your one paramount duty. It wasn't just about heat. It was about comfort, about providing that perfect, gentle warmth that lulls one into a deep, uninterrupted slumber. This early form of luxury personal climate control wasn't about extravagant technology, but rather about dedicated, painstaking effort. It makes you appreciate your thermostat just a little bit more, doesn't it? Now that we've glimpsed the origins of this cozy profession, let's truly step into the worn, soft slippers of the 17th century royal bedwarmer. Your day, as a bedwarmer, wasn't a whirlwind of exciting court intrigue or grand declarations. Oh no, it was a slow, methodical rhythm, dictated by the sun, the palace's vastness, and the precise moment when the royal posterior would desire warmth. You weren't a general or a minister, but your role, in its own quiet way, was utterly indispensable to the monarch's nightly comfort. You see, even absolute power sometimes needed a preheated duvet. Imagine yourself waking up in the servants' quarters, perhaps a small, cold room tucked away in the labyrinthine corridors of Versailles. Your morning duties would involve fetching fresh coals, ensuring your warming pan was meticulously cleaned and polished. No smudges for royalty, even on something designed to go under their sheets. You'd move through the palace, a ghost among the bustling courtiers, your presence almost unnoticed, yet your purpose vital. The sheer scale of these palaces meant that just getting from your quarters to the royal chambers could be a minor trek, navigating endless staircases and long, echoing galleries. It was a daily cardio workout, 17th century style, perhaps without the accompanying upbeat playlist. As the day progressed, your timing would become crucial. You couldn't warm the bed too early, letting the precious heat dissipate into the vast, cold room. Nor could you be too late, risking the monarch encountering a chilly mattress. It was a delicate dance with thermodynamics and royal impatience. You'd listen for cues, the fading chatter from the king's privy council, the distant clatter of the evening meal being cleared, the softening light outside the tall windows. When the moment was right, you'd approach the bed with a solemn, almost ritualistic air. You would carefully draw back the heavy bed curtains, perhaps made of crimson velvet or embroidered silk, revealing the expanse of linen and mattress. Then, with practiced ease, you would open your warming pan, revealing the glowing embers within. A gentle, smoky scent might momentarily waft through the air, quickly dissipating as the pan did its work. You'd slide the pan deliberately, slowly, across the entire surface of the bed, ensuring an even distribution of warmth. Imagine the soft rustle of the linen as the pan glides, a subtle whisper in the otherwise quiet chamber. It wasn't just about heat. It was about preparing a perfect cocoon, a sanctuary from the often harsh realities of court life. You might even smooth out any wrinkles, fluff the pillows, ensuring every detail was just so. It sounds remarkably simple, almost boring, which, of course, is the point for a sleep podcast. But in a world where luxury was defined by such meticulous personal service, this mundane act became an art form. You were, in essence, a monarch's personal comfort engineer. And what about the perils of the job? Well, an overfilled pan could mean a stray spark, a singed sheet, or worse, a tiny ember finding its way to a delicate nightgown. The stakes, while not matters of state, were certainly matters of royal comfort and reputation. A bed warmer who consistently delivered a perfectly tempered bed was highly valued. One who caused even a minor incident might find themselves quickly out of favor. It required a steady hand, a calm demeanor, and an almost intuitive understanding of heat transfer. You might even find yourself engaging in light, almost whispered conversation with a trusted lady-in-waiting, perhaps exchanging pleasantries about the day's trivialities. Historians still debate the exact social standing and potential career progression for a bed warmer. Were they merely servants, or did their intimate proximity to the monarch grant them a unique, albeit subtle, influence? One can only imagine the hushed secrets they might have inadvertently overheard while tending to their fiery duties. It was a job that combined the utterly practical with a surprisingly intimate knowledge of the royal routine. As you continue your ethereal float through the chill of 17th century France, you might start to wonder about the specific gadgets and contraptions used to achieve this nocturnal coziness. After all, a bare hand to a vast, cold bed just wouldn't do, unless you wanted to develop a particularly frosty personality. So, what were the tools of the trade for our dedicated bed warmer? The most iconic and ubiquitous of these devices, as we briefly touched upon, was the warming pan. Imagine a large, round, shallow pan, typically made of brass or copper, perhaps with intricate patterns etched into its lid. This pan was usually about a foot or so in diameter, perfect for holding a good quantity of hot embers from the fireplace. Crucially, it was attached to a long wooden handle, often several feet long. This long handle was key, allowing the bed warmer to reach deep into the vast expanse of a royal bed without having to fully climb in themselves. Delightful blend of efficiency and decorum. You can almost hear the soft clinking of the pan against the bed frame as it was expertly maneuvered. The lid of the pan wasn't just for decoration. It was perforated with small holes or decorative cutouts, allowing the heat to radiate out while keeping the embers safely contained. This prevented sparks from leaping out and setting fire to the priceless damask sheets. A rather important design feature, you'd agree. Nobody wants to be responsible for the king's bedtime inferno. Beyond the standard warming pan, there were other, perhaps lesser-known, methods. Sometimes, particularly in grander homes, you might find porcelain or earthenware hot water bottles, though these were often more fragile and retained heat less efficiently than metal. Think of them as the early, less resilient ancestors of the rubber hot water bottles you might use today. They offered a gentler, more sustained warmth, perhaps for a particularly delicate monarch, or if the bed warmer needed to prepare the bed much earlier. The thought of a servant carefully carrying a heavy, hot ceramic bottle through dimly lit corridors without tripping is enough to give one a mild case of anxiety. Another interesting, albeit less common, method involved heated bricks or stones, sometimes wrapped in cloth. This was a more rustic approach, but certainly effective, especially in country estates or for less elevated members of the nobility. You might find a specially designed holder for these heated bricks, or they might simply be carefully placed under a few layers of blankets. Imagine the satisfying thump as a warmed stone settled into place, slowly radiating its warmth upwards. It sounds wonderfully simple, doesn't it? A bit like finding an unexpected warm spot on a chilly sidewalk. Historians still debate the widespread adoption of these various tools. While warming pans were clearly a household staple across many social strata, the use of ceramic bottles or heated stones likely varied more by regional tradition, economic means, and even personal preference. It speaks to the ingenuity, and perhaps desperation, of a time before easy heating. The goal was always the same: to banish the bone-chilling cold that permeated unheated stone buildings. These simple contraptions, some elegant, some crude, allowed the bed warmer to fulfill their solemn duty, ensuring that when you, the weary monarch, finally retired, you stepped into a haven of comforting warmth. It makes you almost grateful for the humble electric blanket, doesn't it? No hot coals required, just a plug and a switch. Sometimes, progress is undeniably more convenient, if a little less romantic. So, you've witnessed the methodical sweep of the warming pan, ensuring the royal bed is a perfectly toasted haven. But what happens after the royal slumber is secured? Does the bed warmer simply vanish into the shadows, their purpose fulfilled? Not quite. The interesting thing about such specialized roles in history is how they often start in the most elevated circles, and then, like a slow-moving, warm tide, begin to spread. The demand for a cozy bed, it turns out, wasn't exclusive to those sporting crowns and ermine robes. As you drift a little further into this historical reverie, consider the broader society of 17th century France. Below the gilded ceilings of Versailles and the opulent chateaux of the high nobility, there was a thriving, albeit less extravagant, world of wealthy merchants, aspiring gentry, and comfortable bourgeois families. These folks, while perhaps not dining on peacocks every night, certainly appreciated their comforts. And guess what? Their houses, while smaller than palaces, were often just as drafty, their beds just as prone to the icy grip of a winter's night. Naturally, the idea of a pre-warmed bed, initially a royal luxury, began to trickle down. It became a status symbol, a sign that you had arrived. If the king had a bed warmer, then a successful Parisian banker or a provincial baron might aspire to the same. You wouldn't necessarily have a dedicated, salaried royal bed warmer in your employ, but you might have a particularly diligent maidservant or a trusted valet whose evening duties included the crucial task of warming the master's bed. They would use the same familiar warming pans that we just discussed, perhaps slightly less ornate, but equally effective. This dissemination of a seemingly trivial practice tells us something profound about human nature and the pursuit of comfort. Even in an era of stark social hierarchies, the basic desire for a warm, inviting place to rest after a long day transcended class lines. You might imagine a bustling townhouse in Bordeaux, with a merchant patriarch, after a day haggling over wine barrels, eagerly anticipates the warmth generated by his meticulous staff. The soft glow of coals in a warming pan, moved expertly by a servant, would signify the coming of sweet slumber, a small earthly pleasure in a world often fraught with hardship. However, the methods sometimes adapted to the available resources. In more modest, but still comfortable households, a family member might take on the task. Perhaps an older child, or even a spouse, would ensure the bed was ready for the weary breadwinner. This shows the practical evolution of a luxury into a widely appreciated comfort. Historians still argue about the exact point at which personal bed warming transitioned from an aristocratic privilege to a common domestic practice. It's a gradual, almost imperceptible shift, much like the gentle warming of a bed itself. But it certainly wasn't a phenomenon confined solely to the highest echelons of society for long. It became a silent testament to the universal human need for warmth and security, a gentle reminder that even the humblest among us appreciate a cozy night's sleep. And let's be honest, who wouldn't want to avoid that initial shock of icy sheets on a cold night? It's enough to make even the most stoic individual let out a tiny shiver, regardless of their station. As you settle deeper into your imaginary 17th century bed, now wonderfully warm, it's worth pondering another fascinating aspect tied to this pursuit of nocturnal comfort: the curious intersection of warmth, cleanliness, and the often baffling medical beliefs of the era. You see, hygiene in the 17th century was, well, let's just say it had its own unique logic, and a warm bed played an interesting, if sometimes counterintuitive, role. Imagine the prevailing medical theories of the time. The concept of miasma, or bad air, was still incredibly potent. People believed that foul odors and stagnant air carried diseases, which, in a way, wasn't entirely wrong. But their understanding of germ theory was centuries away. So, while you might think a warm, enclosed space could become rather stuffy and less than fresh, the immediate comfort often outweighed longer-term hygienic considerations. A warm bed was seen as restorative, a place where the body could recuperate from the day's chill and the dangers of the ambient air. It was thought to open the pores and allow the body to release harmful humors. Now, about cleanliness itself. Full immersion baths were far less common for many members of society, even the nobility, than we might imagine today. Instead, partial washing, often with linen cloths and scented waters, was the norm. So the bed, rather than being a place of pristine freshness, was more a continuation of one's personal microclimate. This brings us to a rather amusing, if slightly cringeworthy, fringe tidbit: the belief that excessive bathing was actually bad for you. Some physicians argued that water, particularly hot water, opened the pores too much, allowing noxious humors and even disease to enter the body. This meant that while your sheets might be warmed, they weren't necessarily washed with the frequency we'd expect today. Imagine the faint, complex aroma of old linen, faint perfumes, and perhaps just a hint of human warmth. A well-warmed bed might have felt cozy, but perhaps not entirely clean by modern standards. This lack of frequent washing meant that the warmth provided by the bed warmer was even more crucial for comfort. If you weren't feeling entirely fresh, at least you could be warm. It was a trade-off, perhaps, that modern sensibilities might balk at, but one that made perfect sense within the historical context. You can almost hear the gentle crackle of the embers in the warming pan, a comforting sound as you drift off, blissfully unaware of the lingering historical debates about 17th century epidermal integrity. Historians still argue whether the perceived health benefits of a warm bed genuinely outweighed any potential hygienic downsides in the long run. Was the warmth truly beneficial for easing aches and promoting restful sleep, or did it inadvertently contribute to other, less visible issues? What is clear is that for the people of 17th century France, a warm bed was a vital component of comfort, well-being, and even perceived health, a little pocket of warmth in a chilly, often unwashed world. It was a simple, yet profound, daily luxury, a testament to humanity's enduring quest for comfort, even when faced with peculiar notions of personal care. And frankly, after a long, cold day, you probably wouldn't care much about the intricacies of humoral theory if your feet were finally toasty warm. You've journeyed through the cold stone corridors, felt the gentle heat of the warming pan, and perhaps even pondered the peculiar hygiene habits of 17th century France. As the centuries rolled on, technology, in its slow but inexorable march, began to change the landscape of personal comfort, gradually making the dedicated bed warmer a charming, if slightly anachronistic, relic of the past. The flame of this particular profession, much like the embers in the warming pan, slowly faded. The decline of the professional bed warmer can be attributed to several factors. Firstly, architectural innovations began to tackle the pervasive cold that had plagued grand residences for centuries. As we moved into the 18th and 19th centuries, improvements in building insulation, the development of more efficient fireplaces, and eventually the advent of central heating systems, albeit rudimentary at first, meant that houses became inherently warmer. You no longer needed a personal fire-toting individual to chase away the chill. The warmth was simply there. Then came the rise of more convenient and less labor-intensive warming devices. While the warming pan had a good run, it was eventually superseded by simpler, safer alternatives. The humble hot water bottle, evolving from fragile ceramic to more durable rubber, became a common household item. You didn't need a servant to manage hot coals. You could simply boil some water, fill your bottle, and pop it under the covers yourself. It was a democratic shift in bedtime comfort, no longer requiring specialized staff or the delicate handling of live embers. Imagine the sighs of relief from countless maids and valets who no longer had to risk singed eyebrows for the sake of royal toes. Furthermore, changing social customs and the gradual erosion of rigidly hierarchical servant structures meant that many highly specialized, intimate domestic roles, like the professional bedwarmer, began to disappear. The vast retinues of servants that characterized the grandest households of the 17th century started to shrink, and the focus shifted towards more generalized domestic duties rather than hyper-specific tasks. The pomp and elaborate rituals around the royal person, which had necessitated such roles, also slowly mellowed over time. While the professional bed warmer might be gone, their legacy lives on in subtle ways. Every time you snuggle into a pre-warmed blanket, or even just appreciate the ambient warmth of your heated home on a cold night, you're experiencing the echoes of that ancient quest for coziness. You might even find electric mattress pads or heated throws in modern homes, fulfilling the exact same function as that brass warming pan, but with the flick of a switch rather than a scoop of hot coals. Historians still ponder whether the personal touch of a dedicated bed warmer offered a unique psychological comfort that no modern gadget can replicate, or if it was simply a practical solution to a pervasive problem. So, as you drift off, perhaps contemplating the peculiar trajectory of warmth and comfort through history, remember the diligent, often unseen, figures who ensured that even the most powerful individuals could sleep soundly, tucked into a bed that was just right. Their job, while seemingly mundane, played a surprisingly significant role in the nightly rhythm of an entire era. And now, as your own bed beckons, undoubtedly far warmer and less drafty than a 17th century royal chamber, you can truly appreciate the simple luxury of a perfectly warm place to rest. As your mind unwinds and the echoes of 17th century France gently recede, allow yourself to sink deeper into the quiet comfort of your own surroundings. The chill of those ancient stone palaces is long gone, replaced by the reassuring warmth of your personal space. You're no longer picturing vast, cold beds and diligent servants with warming pans, but rather feeling the familiar embrace of your own mattress, perfectly tempered to your liking. The stories of history, even the most seemingly mundane, have a way of softening the edges of the present, don't they? They remind us of the simple pleasures, the universal human needs that transcend centuries and social status. The desire for warmth, for comfort, for a peaceful night's rest. These are threads that connect us all, from the Sun King in his opulent bed to you, tucked in wherever you are right now. Let the gentle whispers of these forgotten facts blend with the soft sounds of your room, creating a tapestry of tranquility that guides you towards slumber. There's nothing left to do now but release the day's thoughts, one by one, like tiny boats drifting out to sea. Feel the weight of your eyelids, the slow, steady rhythm of your breathing, and the profound peace that comes with knowing everything is just as it should be.